right, Ben. So today we're going to have your first O3 since your evaluation. And I know during your last evaluation we talked about just data and how we're going to be working to improve math. Mm-hmm. So our O3 today will be around math instruction. Awesome. And I know I saw an observation last week and I gave notes and I came in briefly yesterday to see some of your math. And just want to say, just as we talked about in your evaluation, like you have a real strength for modeling and making sure that your models are clear and that scholars have the opportunity to participate in the model. So they're not just sitting and like looking at you.
You're right.
And being in STARS. I know that there's something you've worked on, so you're doing a really good job of just providing a clear model. And your models align to the key points.
Cool.
And you also use sticky language to ensure that scholars grasp the concepts. For example, like reaching for the minute. Mm-hmm. So those things are going like really well. Like you add things you need to add to your models. Cool. So all of that is going really well. I think the next step we need to think about that will, I feel like, dramatically improve your data is the monitoring during guided practice.
Okay, cool.
Because you have a clear model. Now we have to aggressively monitor and make sure that scholars are like following the steps of that model successfully and getting the problems correct.
Definitely.
So as we're thinking about beginning aggressively monitoring, I'm going to show you a model video.
Okay.
And while we look at this model video, I want you to look specifically at how much time this teacher spends with scholars. Mm-hmm. Listen to the feedback she's giving to scholars and what impact is noticed, either what you can imply about the impact or what you notice from her monitoring on scholar success. Cool. My favorite place, Uncommon.
Rest of purple, can you turn back to number 1 and 2, please? Nice job, Malcolm. Can you try with the operation team now? It's you. How do you know it would tease out addition?
Because Sister said she forgot to add beautiful camera, so I already know that I have to add.
Let's start playing. Keep it up. Blue row numbers 1 and 2, please. Excellent, Terry, and that's a really nice job showing your work. Nice job, Mr. Marcelin. Nice job, Dean, showing your work for that. Discipline sent out from college, Amaya Farrar. Super job, Talisha.
I'll be right there.
I actually think they're doing time.
Oh yeah, there we go. Looks familiar.
Say it. What did you do? Fix it. Next time, do this on the outside because otherwise it's confusing to the person grading your test of what exactly we're doing. Really nice job finding this inside and showing your work. Good. Good. So what do you need to do first before you write out a number sentence? So keep on finding the missing sign and you'll rock it. Good. Nice job, Daniela.
So that's just a clip of a teacher doing what we call aggressive monitoring.
Cool.
So what did you notice specifically about how much time she's spending with scholars, the feedback, and the potential impact?
It was a very minimum amount of time spent with each scholar, basically telling them where they had succeeded and what they needed to fix. And then she made it super quick by having if she was by a row, she would say okay, purple row, I need you all on page 1, and then she could check the same thing on every scholar's page, and that allowed her. It held all the students accountable to replicating her steps exactly. So if they get if there need to be 2 check marks on a problem by this part and this part, then they know that they need to show this part and this part. So it's holding them accountable to like repeating the model perfectly. And then it's also, it makes the work look like the teacher's. And it also makes sure that the teacher can go through everyone, not like try to reteach it, but just like it looks right. Like it's making sure that instead of having to reteach it, kids know they're expected to do the model, and if they don't do the model, they need to fix it so it looks like a model.
Yeah, and she's able to get, because of the fact you noted that she's moving quickly, like she's spending maybe like 20 seconds with a scholar, maybe even less.
Yeah, right.
But she's able to get to everyone in her class and give them some piece of feedback that is useful, whether it's like affirming feedback and they can keep working, or adjusting feedback that can fix their work. And it keeps scholars engaged in on task because they know that she's coming eventually, and they know that they're going to get something useful to either help them continue to work in a great way, or like focus on what they need specifically to improve. So we're going to look at your video and how you monitored your class. And this was last week. I didn't get video yesterday, but this was last week when they were working on time. And we're going to skip to around the 10-minute mark. And again, I want you to notice your pathway across throughout the room. Your feedback to scholars, like what was it specifically on, and what do you feel like the impact is?
Cool.
Based on how you moved around the room and your feedback to kids. Can you hear it?
Not really.
It's recess.
Okay.
I think we can pretty much stop there. So, as you watched this video of yourself, what did you notice about your movement throughout the room, your feedback to students, and what impact do you feel like you had?
I was staying with one scholar, so it was like a reteach to one scholar rather than like a checking around the room, I guess. And so while that might have been helpful to that one scholar who I was with, it, like other scholars, weren't being held as accountable, and so which probably could like add to off-task behavior and kind of lead to like the feedback loop of like having to spend more time with behaviors rather than working.
And what about your feedback? What were you saying to scholars while you were working with one? I think it was Brandon.
I think it was Drayden in the front, or maybe it was Brandon. But I was like, I didn't hear what I was saying specifically to that scholar, but I was having other scholars just like be on task behavior rather than like specific steps.
Yeah, so mainly you were focused on one student, so you're right. So the gap between this video where the teacher was moving quickly through the room, giving feedback to every scholar, you specifically stayed with one scholar, which, as you noted, may be helpful for that scholar, but not helpful for the rest, leading to some off-task behavior. And it's not reflected in the video, but I think I stopped and stayed with Lenice for a while. Like she hadn't replicated your model yet.
Yeah, right.
Once I got her to replicate it, she could do her work. Yeah, but she was like getting all the time wrong because she was just like writing like random stuff.
Yeah.
So like the impact was it only helped the one scholar, and you ended up managing more behavior than you did giving instructional feedback to scholars. And we want to shift that to where you're able to get to all of the scholars in your classroom, give meaningful feedback to everyone, and also like notice trends and misconceptions, so that you can go back to that very clear model you had, and if there's a step in that model you need to clear up, you're able to do that. And then the last thing, I forgot to mention this in the model video, but what did you see in that teacher's hand while she was walking around the
marker?
She had a marker, and she had her what?
I didn't see.
Or a clipboard. So she had a clipboard, which probably, since she was like writing, she was taking notes on scholars' achievement. And the impact of that is she can help them more during like intervention, because I know you're working to like really be strategic about how to use that. Which I think like the note taking and all of that will come at like a later action step, but I also wanted you to just notice it.
Definitely.
So this week, your specific action step, and you can write this down on your action step, is we're going to work on aggressive monitoring.
All right.
And we're going to begin to do this, and we'll probably do this over a couple of weeks, because there's like a progression that I like for us to go in. And the first parts of aggressive monitoring that I like to work on is doing what I call a victory lap around your room to make sure that students are like all working and on task. Making sure you circulate with your key in your hand to make sure that all scholars are replicating your process, and that you're like clear, like if you need to refer back, to make sure they're not forgetting anything.
Right.
And then also having that key in hand or your exemplar in hand, so that you can do what we call stop the show. Anytime you see that there's a trend in misconceptions, and you can go back to that part of the model and reiterate that.
Sure.
And I would say like the trend that you want to see is anywhere between like 5 to 7 scholars.
Sure.
And when you're thinking about how to strategically do that, like look at these 5 to 7 scholars, who do you think you should look at? Like if you're thinking of in terms of high, medium, and low, who would you look at?
Probably low scholars to see what mistakes they're making. Or I guess if they're already going to get caught in intervention, should I be looking at medium scholars?
So I think when you're thinking of like 5 to 7 as sampling, and you're looking for a trend in misconception, you want to make sure it's a true trend. So I would look at like highs, mediums, and lows. And you probably want to look at, I would say look at around, if you're saying like I'm going to aggressively monitor like 7 students, like when I'm looking to see if I need to stop because of something that's unclear, you would focus maybe 3 of those should be from the middle. And then maybe 2 from the low end. And then 2 from the high end. Because that'll give you like a true sampling. And if you see that, then you know that, hey, like I need to hold up, because scholars who are usually very capable are having a hard time. Scholars who are in the middle. And if you see like medium and low scholars like having a hard time, then I would still go ahead and stop.
But yeah, especially if you have it across the board.
Because you'll always have your highlight Raheem, who tends to do things without any steps, but they're always right somehow. So again, can you name what your action step is?
Yes, aggressive monitoring, making sure I do a victory lap to make sure everyone's on task, circulating with the key in hand, and then when I see a misconception, which would be 5 to 7 scholars, getting something wrong, then stopping the show and doing a quick, like, just showing them, clarifying a step, I guess.
Yeah, clarifying that step like in your model. And that should be easy to do. Because you just go back. You usually leave yours up on the board. So that should be easy to do. So for your practice today, what we're going to do is plan a script. And we're going to plan a script, and then we're going to practice the actual like aggressive monitoring piece, which is why I asked you to bring your lesson plan. So if you're thinking about setting students up for this aggressive monitoring, you want to think about your clear what to do's before you even begin your victory lap. Like, what are the numbers that you want them to complete on their own, possibly? So these are things that I thought of, and you can add to this. Reminding them to follow the steps in your model. Telling them that you are going to walk around to make sure that they're working silently and completing the steps in your model, so they know that you're coming to them. And then giving them a time limit for how to work. So if it's like 10 minutes that they're going to be working, saying that you'll have 10 minutes to do these problems. So you can script out exactly what you want to say, like, and you can, since this is today's lesson, you can think of what you would say, and then we'll practice the aggressive monitoring piece by like you practicing doing a victory lap and noticing like what people are doing that would be great, and then like thinking about a misconception.
Sounds good.
So we'll take about 5 minutes or so. If you get done before then, we'll